There are moments in life when someone says something so painful, so sharp, that your whole body goes cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from winter. No, the kind that starts deep inside your chest and spreads all the way to your fingertips. The kind that makes you stop breathing for just a second. That is what happened to me on a Tuesday afternoon in September. A regular Tuesday. The leaves were just starting to turn outside the window, orange and yellow and a little bit gold. I remember thinking that morning how beautiful it all looked. How peaceful. I did not know that by 3 o'clock my world would tilt sideways. My mother, the woman who raised me, who braided my hair every Sunday morning, who taught me how to make cornbread from scratch, stood in the middle of my living room and pointed at my 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Sweet little Lily with her gap-toothed smile, and her purple sneakers and her stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere. My mother pointed at her and said, quietly but clearly, "She is not really family. She doesn't count the same." I remember the exact second those words hit me. I felt them before I understood them. Like a door slamming in a house that had always been quiet. And I smiled. I don't know why. Maybe because crying felt too dangerous right then. Maybe because Lily was standing right there, looking up at both of us with those big brown eyes. Maybe because I had spent so many years keeping the peace in that family that smiling had become a reflex, a shield, a way of saying I will survive this without making a sound. I smiled and I nodded and I said, "Okay, Mama." But inside I was already breaking. What my mother did not know, what none of them knew yet, was that 2 weeks before she said those words, my father had passed away quietly in the hospital on a Wednesday morning. And 3 days after that, his lawyer had called me with the reading of his will. And in that will, my father, my quiet, steady, always watching father, had left the lake house to Lily. Not to my mother. Not to my brother. Not to the grandchildren who had his last name and his blood type and his eyes. To Lily. My daughter. The child my mother had just called not really family. I did not say a word about it that afternoon. I just smiled and let my mother finish her tea. But everything was about to change. Let me tell you about my family. Let me tell you how it really was, the beautiful parts and the complicated parts. Because no family is just one thing. Every family is many layers, like an old quilt. Some patches soft and warm. Some frayed at the edges. All of it stitched together by time. My parents, Raymond and Estelle, had been married for 41 years when my father passed. 41 years. That is not a small thing. That is a life built together, stone by stone. My father was a quiet man. He did not talk much, but when he did, you listened. He had this way of looking at you that made you feel seen all the way through. Like he already knew what you were going to say, and he was just waiting patiently for you to catch up. My mother, Estelle, was the opposite. She was loud where he was quiet. Expressive where he was still. She had opinions about everything, what you were wearing, what you were cooking, how you were raising your children. She was not unkind. I want to be fair about that. She was not a cruel woman. She was just a woman who had grown up in a world where family meant bloodlines and last names, and who looked like who. She was a woman of her time in many ways. And that time was not always kind to people like Lily. I should explain about Lily. Lily came to me when she was 3 years old. I had been married to a man named David for 6 years, and we had tried everything to have a baby. 3 rounds of fertility treatment. 2 losses that I do not like to talk about, because even now they sit heavy in my chest like stones that never fully dissolve. After the second loss, David and I sat together on our bedroom floor one night and we just held each other. We did not speak. We did not have words. But somewhere in that silence, we both understood that the path to our family was going to look different than we had imagined. Lily was 3 years old and living in a foster home not 30 minutes from our house. She had been there for 8 months. She had big brown eyes and a stubbornness to her that I recognized immediately. A stubbornness that looked a lot like survival. A stubbornness that looked, honestly, a lot like me. From the moment I held her hand in that meeting room, her tiny fingers curling around mine, like she had been waiting for me specifically, I knew. I knew the way you know things that go beyond logic. The way you know a song is your favorite the first time you hear it. We adopted Lily officially on a rainy November morning. The judge had a kind face. Lily wore a pink dress and her hair was in two puffs. She held David's hand on one side and mine on the other, and when the judge said she was ours, she looked up at us and said, very seriously, "Now I don't have to share my rabbit anymore." We laughed. We cried. It was the best day of my life up to that point. David's family welcomed Lily with open arms. His mother, a round soft woman named Carol, became Lily's dedicated grandmother from the very first Sunday dinner. She called Lily my heart. She kept a photo of Lily on her mantelpiece next to photos of all her biological grandchildren, and there was no difference. No distinction. No footnote. My family was more complicated. My mother accepted Lily. I want to be clear about that. She never turned Lily away. She let her sit at the table at Christmas and Easter. She gave her birthday presents and acknowledged her school reports. But there was always a distance. A slight holding back. A warmth that stopped just short of full warmth. I noticed it, but I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself my mother was just an older woman who showed love differently. My brother, Franklin, was less subtle. Franklin had 2 children of his own, and his children were, in his mind, the real grandchildren. He said it in small ways. Which grandchild got the bigger slice of cake? Whose drawings went on the refrigerator at Mama's house? Whose school play she drove 40 minutes to attend? Lily was 8 years old. She was smart and funny, and she had recently decided she wanted to be a marine biologist because she had seen a documentary about octopuses and had never fully recovered from the experience. She carried a notebook everywhere and drew pictures of sea creatures in the margins of her homework. She was, by any measure, an extraordinary child. She was also perceptive the way children are when they have learned early that the world can be unpredictable. She noticed things. She filed them away quietly. She had asked me once, about 6 months before all this happened, why Grandma Estelle never called her my grandbaby the way Grandma Carol did. I had held her close and told her that some people show love in different ways. But she shows it to Franklin's kids that way, Lily said. Not mean. Not accusing. Just noticing. I did not have a good answer for that. My father was different. Daddy was different. From the very beginning, Raymond had looked at Lily the way he looked at all of us, with that steady, patient, seeing kind of love. He taught her to fish the summer she was 5. He let her sit beside him on the porch in the evenings, and he answered every single question she asked, no matter how many there were, and there were always many. He read to her from his old encyclopedias. He showed her how to spot different birds at the feeder. He called her his little scientist. He said it with such pride that your whole chest swelled just listening. My father loved Lily the way love is supposed to work, without conditions, without footnotes, without the invisible asterisk that says, but not quite the same as the others. And I think, in the quiet way he operated, he had noticed everything I had noticed. The smaller slice of cake. The missing drawings on the refrigerator. The way my mother's warmth had a ceiling when it came to Lily. And I think he had decided, in his quiet, steady way, to do something about it. I just did not know it yet. My father had been sick for about a year before he died. His heart, the doctors said. They used words like congestive and progressive and management of symptoms. What they meant, underneath all those careful words, was that time was becoming a limited thing. We spent a lot of time at my parents' house during that year. More than usual. My brother Franklin and his wife Diane drove up from 2 towns over almost every weekend. I came with Lily on weekdays because David was working long hours at his construction management job and I had shifted to working from home by then. That year of being together, all of us crowded into that house, into my parents' routines, into each other's spaces. That was when the cracks started to show more clearly. When there was no hiding them under the normal distance that families keep between visits. It started with small things. The way families always start their difficult seasons, not with one big explosion, but with 100 tiny splinters. One afternoon in early spring, my mother was going through old photographs. This was something she did often during those months, I think because looking back felt safer than looking forward. She spread them out on the dining table, pictures from the 60s and 70s, pictures of her wedding, pictures of Franklin and Mia's babies, pictures from church picnics and summer holidays. Lily was at the table doing her homework. She looked up and saw the photographs and, because she was Lily and curious about everything, she scooted closer to look. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing at a young woman in a floral dress. "That is my mother," Estelle said. "Your great-grandmother." Lily beamed. "She's so pretty. Do I have her nose?" There was a pause. Just a beat too long. My mother looked at Lily and then looked back at the photograph and said, very quietly, "You wouldn't have her features, baby. You didn't come from that line." Lily looked at the photo again. Then she looked at her own hands. Then she nodded slowly, the way she did when she was processing something she didn't fully understand. "Oh," she said. And she went back to her homework. I sat in the kitchen doorway and I felt something tighten in my chest. I told myself it was not unkind. That it was technically true. That my mother had not said anything cruel. But something about the way the moment closed, the way that door shut gently but firmly, stayed with me for days. A few weeks later, my brother Franklin made a comment that was harder to explain away. We were sitting around the dinner table. My father was having a better day and was at the table with us, which felt like a gift. Franklin was talking about his plans to build a deck on his house, and somehow the conversation had drifted to property and inheritance, and what things were worth now compared to 20 years ago. "The lake house alone," Franklin said, helping himself to more potatoes, "must be worth close to 400,000 now. Maybe more." He said it casually. "The way you mentioned the weather." My father said nothing. He just watched Franklin the way he watched everyone, quietly and completely. "It should stay in the family," Franklin continued. "Real family." And then he looked at Lily, who was coloring in a notebook at the end of the table, and he added, "No offense meant. You know how I mean it." Lily did not look up from her notebook. But I saw her crayon slow down on the page. I opened my mouth to say something, but David put his hand on my arm under the table. A gentle pressure. "Not here. Not now." I understood it. We were in my parents' house. My father was sick. This was not the moment. But I watched Lily's crayon move slower and slower across the page until she finally stopped coloring altogether. Later that night, when I was tucking her in, she asked me something that made the breath go out of me. "Mama," she said, pulling her rabbit close, "am I real family? Or the other kind?" I sat on the edge of her bed for a long moment. I wanted to say the right thing. I wanted to say something that would be true and also protect her. I took her face in both my hands, and I looked right into those brown eyes. "You are the realest family I have," I said. "You are the center of it. Everything else is around you." She thought about that. Then she said, "Okay." And she closed her eyes. But I sat there in the dark long after she fell asleep, listening to her breathe, feeling something grow harder and colder in my chest. The weeks continued. My father had bad days and better days. On the better days, he sat on the porch with Lily and they watched the birds together, and he asked her what she'd been learning and she told him, in her precise way, about anglerfish and the deep ocean and how some creatures make their own light. He listened with his whole self. He always did. One afternoon I stepped out to bring them lemonade and I heard my father say to Lily, very quietly, "You know, baby, I always felt like the lake house was waiting for the right person. Someone who would really see it. Who would really love it." Lily looked up at him. "Do you mean me, Grandpa?" My father smiled. That small, true smile of his. "I mean someone with good eyes," he said. "Someone who looks at things carefully." I set the lemonade down and went back inside. At the time I thought it was just his gentle way of complimenting her. I did not understand that he was telling her something real. Something he had already arranged. The tension in the house grew during August, when my father had 2 bad weeks in a row and we all knew, though no one said it, that the end was becoming less abstract. My mother became more anxious. More rigid. She began to say things that, in calmer times, she might have kept private. One evening, my mother was on the phone with her sister, and I was in the next room. I was not trying to eavesdrop. But walls are thin and voices carry. "Franklin should get the house," my mother was saying. "He has a real family to fill it. He has the children who carry Raymond's name." I stood very still. The kind of still where you are afraid that moving will make the moment more real. That other child, my mother continued, and her voice dropped, but not enough. She is a good girl. I'm not saying anything against her. But she is not the same. She is not blood. The lake house should stay with blood. I walked out of the room and down the hallway and into the bathroom, and I turned on the faucet so no one would hear me. I stood over the sink for a long time, hands gripping the cold porcelain. Water running. I thought about what it meant to be family. I thought about adoption papers signed on a rainy November day. I thought about a little girl who had come to us with nothing but a stuffed rabbit and a fierce will to survive. I thought about my father on the porch, telling Lily she had good eyes. I thought, he knows. He is listening. And I think he is doing something about it. But I did not know what. Not yet. September came. My father went into the hospital on a Sunday and did not come home again. He died on a Wednesday morning at 6:42, with my mother on one side of his bed and me on the other and Franklin in the chair by the window. It was very quiet. The monitors beeped once and then stopped, and then my father was simply gone. The way a candle goes out. No drama. Just the light and then the absence of light. Lily was at school. I had arranged it that way on purpose. She was 8. She did not need to see that part. She said goodbye to him the Sunday he went in, and he had held her hand and told her to keep watching the birds, and she had promised she would. I think that was the goodbye he wanted for her. We spent the next week in the foggy, functional state of grief. Arrangements. Phone calls. Food arriving at the door from neighbors. People sitting in my parents' living room saying soft, well-meaning things. The world keeps moving even when you are quite sure it should stop and wait for you. On the 9th day after my father's death, his lawyer called me. His name was Mr. Okafor. He had a gentle voice. He asked me to come in, and he asked me not to bring my mother or brother yet. He said my father had left specific instructions about how the will was to be shared, and in what order. I went alone on a Thursday morning. I sat across from Mr. Okafor at his wide wooden desk, and he placed the document in front of me, and he explained it carefully and calmly. My father had left the house, the main house, to my mother, with provisions for its maintenance and care. He had left his savings divided between Franklin and me. He had left his watch collection to Franklin. He had left me his bookshelves and his old camera. And he had left the lake house, the small, quiet, beautiful house on Miners Lake, the one he had bought as a young man before he was even married, the one that had been in our lives for as long as I could remember. He had left it to Lily. Not to me as Lily's parent. Not in trust for her under my name. Directly to Lily Elizabeth, my daughter, his granddaughter. With a letter. A handwritten letter, folded carefully inside the envelope. Mr. Okafor slid the envelope across the desk to me with both hands, the way you hand someone something precious. I picked it up and I felt the weight of it. Not just the paper. The weight of my father's intention. The weight of a quiet man's love made permanent and legal. I held it for a moment without opening it. Then I put it in my bag, and I thanked Mr. Okafor, and I walked out to my car, and I sat there in the parking lot for 20 minutes without starting the engine. And then I drove home, and I did not say anything to anyone. Not yet. The afternoon my mother said those words, Lily was doing what Lily always did, existing fully and quietly in whatever space she was in. She had her notebook open on the coffee table. She was drawing something with careful, focused lines. She had her purple sneakers on. Her rabbit was propped against the couch cushion beside her. My mother had come over with a casserole and the kind of energy that grief sometimes produces in people, a restlessness, a need to organize and control small things because the big things are out of reach. She had been talking about the estate, about what needed to be sorted, about the lake house specifically. Franklin had called her that morning, apparently. He had brought up the lake house again. He had said things about what made sense, what was fair, what a man like Raymond would have wanted. My mother sat across from me at the kitchen table, and I could see her working herself up to something. I recognized it, the way she pressed her lips together between sentences, the way her hands moved on the table, restless and searching. The lake house needs to be decided, she said. We need to be practical. Franklin has his family to think about. His boys need space. They need room to grow into. The lake house would be perfect for them. I said nothing. I just listened. Raymond loved that place, my mother continued. He would want it to go to his real grandchildren. His blood grandchildren. The ones who carry a piece of him. She paused. No offense to Lily. I love Lily. You know I do. But she is not the same. She is different. I felt my breath slow down. Very deliberately slow. Different how, Mama? I asked. And my voice was calm. I surprised myself with how calm it was. My mother looked at me. Then she looked at Lily. Lily was still drawing. She had not looked up. But I knew that she was listening. You know what I mean, my mother said. Tell me, I said. Another pause. My mother set down her teacup. She folded her hands on the table. She said, she is not really family. Not in the same way. She doesn't have Raymond's blood. She doesn't have our blood. She is a good child, and we love her, but the lake house should go to blood. That is just how it is. The room was very quiet after that. I looked at Lily. Lily was looking at her notebook. But she had stopped drawing. Her pencil was completely still on the page. I picked up my own cup of tea. I took one slow sip. And I smiled. That careful, practiced smile that I had learned over years of keeping peace in complicated rooms. Okay, Mama, I said. I hear you. My mother relaxed. She picked up her tea again. She began to talk about something else, the casserole, the weather, a neighbor's recent surgery. The conversation moved on. Moved away. But in my chest, something had made a decision. After my mother left, I sat on the floor of the living room with Lily. She had climbed into my lap, which she still did sometimes, even at 8 when she needed to feel safe. She pressed her face against my shoulder and she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I heard what Grandma said. I closed my eyes for a second. I know, baby. She thinks I'm not the same, Lily said. Not crying. Not angry. Just saying it, the way she said true things. Grandma has some ideas about family that are different from ours, I said carefully. What are our ideas? Lily asked. I thought about it. I wanted to get it right. Our idea is that family is who chooses you and who you choose. And that love makes you family. Not just blood. I paused. Your Grandpa Raymond had that same idea. Lily was quiet again. Then she said, I miss Grandpa. Me too, I said. Me too, baby. We sat on the floor together until the room got dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I just held my daughter and listened to the quiet house around us. The following Saturday was the reading of the will with the full family present, my mother, my brother Franklin and his wife Diane, and me. Mr. Okafor conducted it at the family home, sitting at the dining room table where we had all sat together so many times. He was patient and thorough. He explained each provision clearly. When he got to the lake house, the room changed. Raymond James Whitfield, Mr. Okafor read, bequeaths the property known as 14 Miners Lake Road, in its entirety, including the structure and all land within the recorded boundary, to Lily Elizabeth, adopted daughter of his daughter. Franklin sat forward in his chair. My mother made a small sound, like air leaving a room when a window shuts. Mr. Okafor continued reading without pause. He read the full legal language calmly, thoroughly. He noted that it was ironclad. That it had been prepared 18 months ago with full legal counsel. That my father had been of sound mind and full intention. When he finished, the room was very still. Franklin's jaw was tight. He looked at me and I could see him trying to arrange his expression into something neutral and failing slightly. There must be a mistake, my mother said. Her voice was very small. There is no mistake, Mrs. Whitfield, Mr. Okafor said gently. Your husband was quite specific. And quite deliberate. He reached into his folder. He also left this, to be read aloud at this meeting, if you are all willing. He looked at me. I nodded. He unfolded a piece of paper, not the letter to Lily, that was private and still in my bag, but a separate, shorter note, written in my father's careful, slanted handwriting. Mr. Okafor read it aloud. To my family, I have watched and listened all my life, as you know. I have watched how love works and how it sometimes fails and how it sometimes surprises you. Lily came to us, and I watched how she looked at the world carefully, curiously, with good eyes and an open heart. The lake house needs someone like that. It needs someone who will see it, really see it, not as property or inheritance or a marker of who belongs and who does not, but as a place where the water is still, and the birds come every morning and the light does something extraordinary in the late afternoon. Lily sees those things. She always has. She is my granddaughter in every way that matters. I am leaving the house to the person who will love it best. I trust you all to understand that in time. Mr. Okafor folded the paper and set it on the table. No one spoke for a long moment. My mother had her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were wet. Franklin was looking at the table. Diane reached out and took Franklin's hand. I looked at the letter on the table, my father's handwriting, curling and familiar, and I felt something open in my chest. Something that had been closed for a very long time. Like a window in a room that has been dark. I did not feel triumphant. I want to say that clearly. I did not feel like anything had been won. Grief does not work that way. Loss does not work that way. My father was gone, and no house in the world was worth the trade. But I felt seen. I felt like something true had been said out loud by someone who could no longer be argued with. And I thought about Lily on the floor of the living room, pressed against my shoulder in the dark, saying I miss Grandpa. And I thought, he is still speaking for you, baby. He is still speaking for you. The days after the will reading were hard in the particular way that revelations are hard, not because something new has been added to the world, but because something old has finally been seen clearly. My brother Franklin barely spoke to me for 2 weeks. He was not violent or explosive. He was Franklin, and Franklin's anger turned inward and became silence. He stopped calling. He stopped texting. He sent a formal, short message through Diane to say he needed time. I gave him time. I had no choice, and I also understood. He had built a picture in his mind of what the future looked like, the lake house in summer, his boys running down to the water, the smell of the grill on the porch, and that picture had been replaced by a different one. Grief is often like that. It is not always about death. Sometimes it is about a future you had imagined and then lost. My mother was another story entirely. She called me 3 days after the will reading. It was early morning, before Lily was up, and I stepped out to the back porch to take the call. The air was cool. The leaves were still turning. I need to talk to you, she said. I know, I said. She was quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing. I could hear, under the breathing, that she had been crying. I said something, she began. A few weeks ago, in your living room. About Lily. She stopped. You don't have to, I started. Yes, I do, she said, firmly. And the firmness surprised me. My mother was many things, but she was not often the one to push through her own discomfort. Not voluntarily. She took a breath. I said she was not real family. I said she didn't count the same. Yes, I said quietly. She heard me, my mother said. Yes. Another long pause. The kind that is full of things that are being sorted through on the other end. Raymond would have been ashamed of me, she said. I did not agree or disagree. I let it sit. I have been thinking, my mother continued, about all the years. About the little things. The way I held back. The way I always thought of her as almost. As close, but not quite. And I have been thinking about Raymond at that porch, with her, all those afternoons. Her voice broke slightly. He never held back. Did he? No, I said. He never did. He loved her the full way, my mother said. The same way. He did, Mama. I heard her breathe. The kind of breath that comes after a long time of holding something in. I don't know when I started thinking that way, she said. About blood and names and who is real and who is not. My mother thought that way. Her mother thought that way. It goes back so far I don't even remember learning it. I just absorbed it, like the air. I know, I said. That doesn't make it right, she said quickly. I'm not making excuses. I know that too. She was quiet again. Then she said, Can I talk to Lily? I thought about it. I thought about my daughter in her room, asleep, with her rabbit and her notebook of sea creatures. I thought about the question she had asked me, am I real family or the other kind? Yes, I said, but not on the phone. Come here. Come and sit with her. Let her see your face. My mother came that Sunday. I made tea. Lily was in the living room when her grandmother arrived, and there was a moment, just a breath of a moment, where I saw Lily's face go carefully neutral, the way it did when she was protecting herself. That careful face broke my heart a little. That a child should need to protect herself at the door of her own home. My mother walked in and she sat down on the couch. Not at the table, not at a distance. On the couch, close to where Lily was sitting. And she looked at my daughter, really looked, the way my father always had, and she said, "Lily, I need to tell you something." Lily held her rabbit. She waited. "I said something hurtful," my mother said. "A few weeks ago. You heard it." "I know you did." Lily looked at her quietly. "I called you not real family," my mother said. "And that was wrong. It was wrong and it was not true, and I am sorry." She paused. "I am very sorry, baby." Lily was quiet for a long moment. She has never been a child who rushes through important things. Then she said, "Grandpa Raymond always made me feel like real family." "He was wiser than me," my mother said. "He always was." And her voice broke on that sentence, just a little, and I saw something move in Lily's face, a softening. "I miss him too," Lily said. "I miss him a lot." My mother nodded. "Me too," she said. "Every single day." They sat together for a moment. Not hugging, not solving everything in one conversation. Just sitting together in the truth of what had been said and what had been lost and what might, slowly, be rebuilt. Then Lily said, "Do you want to see my drawings?" And my mother said, "I would love that very much." And Lily got her notebook and sat beside her grandmother and showed her every single sea creature she had drawn, with careful explanations, and my mother asked questions and listened. And I stood in the kitchen doorway with my hands around my own cup of tea, and something in my chest loosened, slowly, like a knot that has been held too long finally beginning to give. It was not the end of everything. I want to be honest about that. Real life does not have tidy endings. My mother did not transform overnight into a different person. Old habits and old thoughts do not dissolve in one afternoon of tea and drawings. But something had shifted. Something genuine. The kind of shift that starts small but moves the whole foundation eventually. My brother Franklin called me about 3 weeks later. It was a short call. He said he had been thinking. He said he understood, now that he had thought about it clearly, that their father had made the decision he believed in. He said he was not happy about it, but he was not going to fight it. And then he said something that I had not expected. He said, "Tell Lily I'm sorry. For the things I said. The way I made her feel." I told him I would pass it along. "She's a good kid," he said. And he sounded like he really meant it. Like maybe he was hearing it for the first time, with all his defenses down. "She is," I said. We said goodbye, and I stood there with the phone in my hand, and I thought about how grief has this particular power to strip things down. To remove the decorations people put over the truth until all that is left is the plain, bare fact of what matters and what does not. What my father's death had stripped away, for all of us, was the comfortable distance we had kept around each other. The way you can ignore something for years when life is busy and routine and no one is asking hard questions. But death asks hard questions. It comes in and sits down and refuses to be ignored, and in the silence it creates, you hear things you had been drowning out. My father had spent his whole life asking the most important question quietly, through his actions, through the way he showed up, through where he placed his attention and his patience and his love. He had asked, who deserves to be seen fully? Who deserves to be loved the full way? And his answer, always, his consistent lifelong answer, had been everyone at the table. Everyone in the room. Everyone who comes with open hands. He had made that answer permanent. He had put it in writing. He had made it legal and unchangeable. And in doing so, he had said something that outlasted him. He had said, "Lily is family. Lily has always been family. And here is the deed to prove it." I took Lily to the lake house in October. The leaves were full gold by then, reflected in the water. The whole world felt like it was burning quietly and beautifully, the way it does in that particular season. Mr. Okafor had given me the key. He had also given me the letter, my father's handwritten letter to Lily, the private one, the one he had prepared and kept separate. I carried it in my jacket pocket the whole drive to the lake. We pulled down the gravel road to the house just as the afternoon light was doing exactly what my father had described. Something extraordinary. slanting golden across the water, picking out the ripples, making the whole surface of the lake look like it was lit from underneath. Lily pressed her face against the car window. She was very quiet. We got out and she stood at the edge of the dock and she looked at the water and the light and the ring of old trees, and she did not say anything for a long time. She just looked. Carefully. With everything my father had recognized in her. Then she turned to me and said, "Grandpa was right. It does do something special with the light." "He told you about that?" I asked. "He told me a lot of things," she said. "When we were on the porch. He told me about the lake a lot." She turned back to the water. "He said it was the place where he felt most like himself. Where everything got quiet in the right way." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the envelope. I held it out to her. She looked at it, then at me. "From Grandpa," I said. "He wrote it for you." Before I stopped. Took a breath. "He wanted you to have it." She took the envelope with both hands. She held it for a moment, looking at her name on the front in his handwriting. Then she carefully, slowly opened it. I stood back a little. To give her room. To give the moment room. She read it to herself. I watched her face move through several expressions: concentration, surprise, something soft, and then something that was not quite crying but was close to it. The way children look when something is too big for their usual expressions. After a while, she folded the letter carefully. She held it against her chest, both arms crossed over it, the way she held her rabbit. "He says I have good eyes," she said, her voice a little thick. "He was right," I said. "He says this place is mine now," she continued. "And he says," she pressed the letter tighter, "he says that blood is just one way of being family. And that the other ways are just as real." She looked up at me. "He says I am his in the other way. And that the other way is the best way." I couldn't speak for a moment. I just looked at my daughter, standing on the dock of a lake house that was hers, holding a letter from a man who had seen her clearly from the very beginning. He was a very smart man, I managed. "He was the best grandpa," Lily said simply. "We stayed at the lake house until the sun went all the way down and the stars came out over the water. We sat on the dock with our legs hanging over the edge, the way Lily and my father used to sit on the porch at my parents' house. We talked about him. We told each other the things we remembered. She told me about their conversations, the things he had said about fish and birds and stars, and the way the world worked if you watched it carefully enough. Things I had not known he had shared with her. Things that made me realize how much of their relationship had been quiet and private and full. He had been building something with her all those afternoons. I just had not seen the whole picture until now. He had been building the certainty that she was loved, that she was seen, that she mattered exactly as much as anyone else at that table, in that family, in this world. He had been building it quietly, the way he built everything, patiently, carefully, without announcement. And then he had made it permanent. When we drove home that night, Lily fell asleep in the back seat about 20 minutes into the journey. She had the folded letter in her hand, even in sleep. I drove through the dark and I thought about my father. I thought about what he had understood that the rest of us had missed, or ignored, or been too comfortable to confront. I thought about the small cruelties of belonging, how family can become a thing we use to include and also to exclude, without even noticing the damage we do. I thought about Lily's question on that Tuesday afternoon in September. Am I real family, or the other kind? And I thought about how my father had answered that question, not with words, but with a deed. Not with reassurance, but with permanence. Not with sentiment, but with something solid and legal and impossible to take back. He had known what she needed. He had known, with those steady-seeing eyes of his, that words are sometimes not enough. That love sometimes needs to be made into something concrete, something that exists in the world and cannot be erased by the opinions of others. He had given her the house. And with it, he had given her the answer. You are real family. You have always been real family. Here is the proof. It has been 7 months now since we lost my father. 7 months since that September afternoon when my mother said the words that cracked something open in all of us. A lot has changed. Not everything. Some things are still tender. Some conversations still have awkward edges. Healing is not a straight road. It doubles back and circles around, and sometimes you find yourself in a familiar hurt that you thought you had moved past. But things have genuinely shifted. My mother comes to our house now. She comes for dinner, for Sunday afternoons, for ordinary weekday visits when there is no occasion. And she sits beside Lily at the table. She asks about the sea creatures. She has learned the difference between an anglerfish and a viperfish, and she is genuinely proud of that knowledge. She calls Lily my grandbaby now. Not loudly. Not with the drama of making up for something. Just quietly, naturally, like it is the most obvious thing in the world. Which, of course, it always was. My brother Franklin is still finding his way. But he came to Lily's school play in November. He sat in the back row with his wife, and he clapped the loudest when Lily came on stage. She played a mermaid, appropriately, and afterward he ruffled her hair and said, "You were the best one up there, kid." And Lily looked at him with her clear brown eyes and said, "Thank you, Uncle Franklin," and it was simple and it was enough. David says I seem lighter. He said it one evening when we were washing up after dinner, when Lily was doing homework at the table and the kitchen was warm and smelled like garlic and bread. He said, "You seem lighter. Like something you were carrying got put down." I thought about that. I thought about the weight I had been carrying for years, the watchfulness, the wondering, the holding my breath in certain rooms, the fear that my daughter was not being held fully by the people who should have held her that way automatically. "Something did get put down," I said. "Your dad?" David asked. "In a way," I said. "He said something when he left. He said something that can't be unsaid now. And I think I've been waiting a long time for someone to say it." David was quiet. He understood. My father was not a man of grand gestures. He did not make speeches. He did not call out injustice loudly in the room. He was not that kind of person, and I think, honestly, that even if he had tried to confront my mother or my brother directly, it would not have landed the same way. They would have argued. They would have defended. They would have called it sensitivity or overreaction, and the conversation would have closed. Instead, he did what he always did. He watched. He thought. He waited. And then he acted quietly, permanently, and with such clarity of love that there was no room for argument. He put it in a will. He put it in a house on a lake. He put it in his own handwriting. "She is my granddaughter in every way that matters." And I think about how many people there are in the world, in families like mine and families nothing like mine, who spend their lives in the space my daughter occupied for those years. Half included. Close, but not quite. Loved, but with an asterisk. And how heavy that is. How quietly, persistently heavy. Even for a child who does not have the words for what she is feeling, who just knows that something is slightly off, slightly too cold, slightly not quite all the way. My father knew. He had seen it with those steady eyes. He had felt it as an injustice, even if he was too gentle a man to use that word. And he had thought about what he could do that would be real and lasting and true. He gave her the lake house. But really, he gave her something larger than a house. He gave her the unambiguous, legally recorded, permanent truth of belonging. And I really believe this, that he gave my mother and my brother something too. He gave them the chance to finally see what they had been missing, what they had been withholding. He gave them a mirror, and he gave them a reason to look. And they looked. It took shock. It took loss. It took sitting with the discomfort of realizing that the man they loved had seen something in them that needed correcting, and had corrected it, not with anger, but with love and with a deed. Sometimes I sit on the back porch in the evenings, in that quiet time after Lily is in bed. I watch the birds come to the feeder that I have set up, the one I put out in memory of my father. And I think about what he saw, all those years. What it must have been like to be that still, that patient, that watching. I think he knew, long before any of us, how the story was going to go. He knew his wife's heart better than anyone. He knew it was not a bad heart, it was a trained heart, a conditioned heart, a heart that had learned certain limits and accepted them as natural. He knew that the limit could be broken. That it could be broken with enough love applied in the right place at the right time. He was just that kind of man. He believed in people. He believed in their capacity to change and to grow and to arrive, eventually, at their better selves. He just decided to give them a nudge from beyond. And I have to smile at this, because it is so very him. He made sure the nudge was completely, legally, notorially impossible to ignore. Lily asked me last week if we could go to the lake house for Christmas this year. She wants to decorate it, she said. She wants to put lights along the dock. She wants to see what the light does to the water in winter. She said Grandpa Raymond told her it was different in winter, darker and more silver and very quiet. I said yes. I called my mother after and asked if she wanted to come. There was a pause. Then she said, "Is there room for an old woman who is still learning?" I said there was always room. She said she would bring cornbread. I said that sounded perfect. I hung up and I stood in my kitchen for a moment with the phone in my hand, and I felt something I have not fully felt in a long time. Something that is not quite happiness, because happiness is too simple a word for it. Something more like rightness. Like the world settling into a shape that is closer to what it was always supposed to be. My father is gone. That loss does not shrink. It is a permanent shape in the landscape of my life now, like a tree that has been cut down and the stump remains, and you feel its absence every time you walk past the place where it stood. But his love did not leave with him. It is in a house on a lake. It is in a handwritten letter that an 8-year-old girl keeps in her drawer beside her stuffed rabbit. It is in my mother's voice when she says my grandbaby without even noticing that it took effort once. It is in my brother's clapping in the back row of a school auditorium. It is in the way a little girl stands on a dock in the late afternoon light and looks at the water with good eyes and an open heart. That is what he left us. That is the real inheritance. Not the house. The understanding. The reminder that family is built, not given. That love is a practice, not a feeling. That belonging is something you create, carefully and deliberately, one ordinary afternoon at a time. My father spent 40-some years creating it. And then he spent his last months making sure it would hold even after he was gone. I call that wisdom. I call that love. I call it the most important thing he ever taught me. Blood is just one way of being family. The other ways are just as real. And sometimes the other ways are the best ways. I call it the most important thing he ever taught me. Raymond James Whitfield, in a letter to his granddaughter.